What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the No Bros All Monos podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Phoebus, and we're coming at you today with another episode. We only got one big fight card on the agenda today, UFC 282. We're going to talk about the main event, co-main event, and then one of the stars from the card that I thought really shined out. But if you guys can do me a favor, like, share, subscribe the video, comment. It really helps out the channel. But anyways, yeah, let's jump right into it. In your main event of UFC 282 that went down Saturday night for the light heavyweight belt, we had Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev, and this fight ended in a 5-round split draw. So, what do we think of the fight? Well, round one, we had clean leg kicks by Jan, as to be expected, good leg kick checks. But in the end, I gave round one to Magomed. I thought he landed the cleaner on the counter, and the teep kick just proved to be pretty deadly. So I just gave round one to Magomed. Round two, Magomed was already starting to show pain in his right leg after some of those leg kicks. He had it kicked out in that round. Jan was just more active, landed better shots. I gave the second round to Jan pretty clearly. Round three, Jan had more good leg kicks. He started to compromise the second leg of Magomed as he switched stances to the, it would have been orthodox stance with the left foot forward. So he was now compromised on both left and right leg. But Magomed was landing, more clean strikes. I thought he secured a takedown at the end of the round, but he had minimal ground and pound, not too much, but he had some, just based on the timing at the end of the round. I gave round three to Jan as well. I just thought that Jan was more effective in the round, especially now that you see how compromised the legs of Magomed were. They were the damage that it inflicted. So I gave that third round to Jan. Round four, it was a good in-fight adjustment by Magomed, where he pushed forward and closed the distance and made contact via the clinch to prevent Jan from being able to throw and set up these leg kicks, or for Magomed to even have to, check the leg kicks. Magomed had gotten a good takedown 2 minutes into the round with some good control, good ground and pound. He was constantly moving on up top, whether it was via head movement or switching the position just constantly or throwing strikes. I thought it was Magomed's round, pretty clear 10-9. So we had a 39-39 heading into round four, 2-2 apiece. Round five, I think, was the clearest round of them all. Magomed Ankalaev secured a takedown 30 seconds into the round, and then complete control for the entire round. Nasty ground and pound for some in the round, making it 10-8, giving it a 10-8, making it 49-47 on my scorecard for Magomed Ankalaev. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It would have been 48-47. Oh, no, that is right. 49-47 for Magomed. Now, how did the judges score this card? Judge Mike Bell had the fight 48-47, Jan Blachowicz, giving the first 3 rounds, as we can see, to Jan Blachowicz, and the final 2 to Magomed Ankalaev, all 10-9s on all the rounds. Derek clearly scored the first round and second round for Jan Blachowicz, and then the third and fourth from Magomed Ankalaev, and the fifth being a 10-8 of those 3 that he scored for Magomed Ankalaev, as we can see. And then Sal D'Amato scored the fight 10-9, the first 3 rounds for Jan Blachowicz. The round 4, 10-9 for Ankalaev, and then a 10-8 for Magomed Ankalaev, making it 47-47 for Sal D'Amato, 46-48 for Magomed Ankalaev on Derek Cleary's scorecard, and yes, like I said, 48-47 for Jan Blachowicz on Mike Bell's scorecard, ending in a split draw. What's interesting, though, is that every judge gave round 1 to Jan, which I think was probably the closest of the round 2 judges. Like I said, had round 5 at 10-8 for Jan, which I agree with. And rounds 2, 3, and 5 were probably the most definitive rounds for either, with 2 for Jan and then 4. Rounds 2, 4, and 5 were the most definitive, with round 2 for Jan and 4 and 5 for Magomed Ankalaev. On verdict, let's see how they scored it. The World we scored it. Round 1 went to Blachowicz. Round 2 went to Blachowicz pretty clearly. It was actually the second clearest round of the fight on verdict. And then round 3, very close as well, went to Jan. And then round 4, of course, clearly for Ankalaev. Round 5, definitively dominant for Magomed. Verdict. It just proves again that on their end that dominance in rounds wins the fight, which is why you see, even though Magomed lost, rounds 1 through 3, he was at least competitive, and that totaled up. And then when he completely dominated in round 5, it separated the score margin, and they came down to a 47-46 scorecard for Magomed Ankalaev. I think Magomed won that fight. One judge scored it that way. Verdict scored it that way. Like I said, I scored it that way. And then I think the most compelling thing about this is that the MMA media scored it this way, as we can see here. All of MMA media, except for 2 people, Tyler Treese and Tim Burke, scored the fight for Ankalaev 48-47, with some different ones in there, 49-45 and a 49-46 in there as well. Let's look at the stats on Fight Metric real quick if we can. As we see, the stats here, they back it up. Magomed won this fight. The numericals match the visuals in this case. So, it just leaves us with this terrible outcome with a draw. And the problem is that you can't run this fight back, obviously because it was a good fight, but not a real memorable one. So let's think. Where does this leave the division? Well, let's fast forward to the post-fight presser. Dana White immediately announced Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira for the vacant belt. I just think this division's in a strange place. Hill was sitting at number 7, and he gets the title shot with Yuri out. As we can see in the rankings, Glover at number 2, Jan and Magomed were 3 and 4 respectively. Rakic is out with a knee injury, and Smith has already fought Glover, but was scheduled actually to fight Jamal Hill. But now that the UFC has announced that fight, his fight has fallen out. So you end up with Jamal Hill fighting Glover Teixeira for the belt. And I guess Magomed gets the winner of that title fight if the UFC was just being honest about who actually won last Saturday's contest between Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz. But if Jan gets the shot, it's a rematch. It's a rematch versus Teixeira, or a new fight against a dangerous striker. So it's cool, but this division is just in a very strange spot. It's kind of in a wild spot, but not like bantamweight or lightweight. I just think Magomed got screwed by the judges in this, and I really thought Magomed Ankalaev won the fight. Just terrible, just terrible. Terrible judging in my opinion. And, from one fight, this was the main event. We can go into the co-main event now where it kind of had laid the groundwork as far as the judging. With a fight card that was, all finishes going into the co-main event, main event. It was just wild that the fight card, could just be marred by this. But in your co-main event, we had Paddy Pimblett defeating Jared Gordon via unanimous decision. Let's look at the fight. Round 1, the hooks, both left and right by Gordon, were money. He snapped Paddy's head back a few times. I mean, Paddy's chin was just up in the air, up there for taking. Paddy landed a few good flurries, but wasn't landing as cleanly as Gordon was with as many of those strikes. The late takedown for Gordon really secured the round for me. He was just landing clean, man. I mean, he was right hook, left hook, just right on the chin of Paddy. I gave round 1 a 10-9 to Gordon. Round 2, it was a good round for Paddy. He landed a little more effectively. He mixed in the body kick very well. The submission attempt with the arm triangle, I gave a little credit to that, not too much, but I gave it some just because it was definitely getting there, but it wasn't super, super close to ending the fight. End of the round with some good combos. Not a bad round for Gordon, though. The shots he landed, were some big ones, were some damaging ones, but good takedown, good control. But I'd still give the round 10-9 to Paddy just based on the volume. I just thought he landed a little bit better. I gave the round to 10-9 Paddy. So we had 19-19 heading into round 3. Round 3, Jared Gordon dictated this round. He got an early takedown, controlled from the top, controlled the clinch. He got another late takedown, landed a very minimal strikes. Paddy landed a few strikes, but to me that round was 10-9 for Gordon, with my score ending at 29-28 Gordon. Now, how the judges scored it. We had Doug Crosby scoring as we can see, the opening 2 rounds 10-9 for Paddy, with round 3 being 10-9 for Jared Gordon. Chris Lee scored it 10-9 in the first round for Jared Gordon. The final 2 rounds, 10-9 for Paddy Pimblett, making it 29-28 Paddy Pimblett. And Ron McCarthy scored rounds 1 and 2 for Paddy Pimblett and round 3 for Jared Gordon. How did Verdict score this fight? The World scored it round 1 for Jared Gordon, round 2, though close, for Paddy Pimblett, and round 3 for Jared Gordon, 29-28. Dominance in round 1 is what separated the gap there. How did the MMA media score it? We had one person score it for Paddy Pimblett. The rest scored it for Jared Gordon. A pretty even split between 29-28 and 30-27, 30-27 for Jared Gordon. The one that scored it for Paddy Pimblett was Dan Urban from Couchside Judges Podcast. He scored rounds 2 and 3 for Paddy, which I think, after rewatching, if you are going to score any rounds for Paddy Pimblett, you should be scoring rounds 2 and 3, making it 29-28 for Paddy. Watching this fight live, I thought Gordon clearly won the fight. And, after rewatching, I could see case for Paddy Pimblett. I'm just going to be dead honest and transparent about it. Let's look at when we look at the fight metric stats, Jared Gordon had more control time throughout the entire fight by a wide margin, 6:28 minutes of control time to 35 seconds of control time for Paddy Pimblett. Now, when you look at the actual striking per round, round 1, we had 29 strikes landed by Paddy Pimblett and 30 for Jared Gordon. Now, Paddy had thrown 70 and Jared Gordon only 51, but when you look at this numerically, it doesn't really tell the full story of how effective some of those strikes were. So numerics does not always equal visuals, but sometimes it does. But in this case, for round 1, I think it does. Now, round 2, Paddy Pimblett landed more strikes, 28 out of 70 to Jared Gordon's 24 of 46, which I think that Paddy did win that round. And then round 3, you see we had 6 of 15 for Paddy Pimblett and 4 of 4 for Jared Gordon. Now, that also doesn't give the context this round because of the amount of control time and as far as, everything like that. As you can see, though, round 3, Paddy had more strikes as he did in all 3. Like, he actually attempted more strikes as he did in all 3 rounds. But the takedowns, the control time, I believe, as well as the damage done in round 1, are why Gordon won the fight. But my overall biggest takeaway is that, and I think this is the key that everybody needs to come to grips with, whether you agree who won the fight or not. Paddy's not ready for the top 15, and he is headed that way. There's no turning back. You don't go backwards in the UFC. You only go forwards on wins, and he's not ready for the top 15. If we take a look at the top 15 ranking, top 15 of the lightweight division, I don't know who I would favor him to beat in the top 15 right now. So let's just start in a best case scenario. So let's just start at 13. I don't think he can beat Renato Moicano. I don't think he can beat Damir Ismagulov. I think Dan Hooker at 11 is a terrible matchup for him just based on the style of striking that Dan Hooker does with the teep kicks, the knees. I think Jalen Turner at number 10 would KO Paddy. And Armin Saryukin, are you serious? I don't think Paddy would stand a chance. You have Conor down at 14. I don't think it's a good matchup either for Paddy, just based on the power, the speed. But I also don't think that Conor would take that fight as his comeback fight. And then you're left with Tony Ferguson. I think he's still dynamic enough to be able to beat Paddy, but I really think it's the only fight that you could even questionably see Paddy even being in and having a chance. He keeps his chin too up in the air. He doesn't move his head off the center line. His gas tank is questionable. He just clearly has some work to do. And, with this many fights under his belt, you would just think that, some of these issues would be cleared up, especially if they've been persistent issues, fight over fight over fight. Even in his, first fight that we saw him in fighting under the UFC banner, his chin was way up in the air. He got caught, and it still hasn't been corrected. And I think this is, his third fight in the UFC now. And, the things aren't getting fixed that should be getting fixed. He's even had boxing coach Teddy Atlas tell him, on his podcast, The Fight with Teddy Atlas, that he needs to get his chin down. Practice with, put your wallet underneath your chin and practice throwing strikes from there. You don't want to get your wallets, you don't want to drop your wallet and have it stolen, so, keep your chin down. And he's not even working on that. There's just flaws. There's flaws in his game, and I think that, these top echelon guys could clearly expose that, expose these deficiencies that he's having. But going back to the fight, was it a robbery? When I watched it live, I thought that this was clearly a robbery. So no, I don't think it was a robbery. Did the wrong guy get the decision? In my opinion, yes. And there's just this, maybe it's just me on this opinion. Maybe it's not. Maybe more of you guys out there, I'd want to know in the comments, but it just seems to me that somehow the stars or fan favorites of the UFC or have been getting these close decisions in fights that, maybe they lost. And, we see bad judging. It happens, I think, fewer times than maybe acknowledged or not as often as maybe stated. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen is basically the point. But it seems that, sometimes the stars just align for these stars to succeed. And, it just leaves, the lesser popular, fighter getting screwed sometimes. And I don't know how we can reconcile with it. We'll talk more about the judges here later on in this podcast. But it just seems that somehow, the stars just align. Paddy Pimblett, I thought he lost this decision. But, he somehow pulls this off, just for a card that was so great, even the early prelims were good. If you haven't watched them, go back and watch them. The early prelims are good. The regular prelims are good. The start of the main card, the first 3 fights were amazing. All finishes, all 10 fights going into the co-main event were finishes. And then we're left with this weird judge's decision in the Paddy Pimblett fight. And honestly, in my opinion, an even worse judge's decision in the main event. Just issues. But let's talk about a fight earlier on the UFC 282 fight card. We're going to talk about Ilia Topuria versus Bryce Mitchell. And in this fight, Ilia Topuria wins this fight via arm triangle in the second round, 3 minutes and 10 seconds into the round. What can we say about this fight? Ilia Topuria is a hammer, and he dominated Bryce Mitchell. If we look at the stats numerically on Fight Metric, they don't tell the story, in my opinion, because this fight was one-way traffic. Ilia Topuria was never in any real danger in this fight. And Bryce Mitchell is not a bad fighter. I mean, he was ranked number 9 in the world. He's beaten some great guys. I mean, he dominated Barbosa, a great striker. But Ilia was just better. His striking is good. He's got power in both hands, decent kicks. Footwork is good. He's able to pull in and out quickly, cage cut effectively. The ground and pound is mean. And he's got submissions. And he just submitted a guy who's known for his jiu-jitsu. he's coming up, and he's coming up fast. And, I'm going to make the claim right now that Ilia Topuria will be a title contender in this 145 division. He was at ranked number 14 coming into this fight. He just beat Bryce Mitchell, number 9. So if we look at the rankings here, we see, a fight with Giga Chikadze could be next. But in my opinion, that's a terrible matchup for Giga, just based on the grappling effectiveness of Ilia. Calvin Kattar's right there at number 7. I think it'd be fun, but I'd still favor Ilia. And then you have Korean Zombie above him at number 6. And honestly, I think that Ilia Topuria would KO Korean Zombie at this point in the Korean Zombie's career. And then above that, Josh Emmett, of course, he's booked with Yair Rodriguez for the interim title fight. And then you have Arnold Allen, who sits there at number 4 with no fight, coming off of the weird win over Brian Ortega. A fight that he was winning, or outstriking Ortega before Ortega suffered the injury. He's at number 3. I think a fight with Arnold Allen would be really, really interesting. I don't know if the UFC is going to make that happen just because of the disparity between their rankings. But I think he's the first. He would be the next closest guy if we were to move Ilia up the rankings that would actually give problems, or that we would actually really question. Who's going to win this fight? It would really make it interesting, and I think the odds would be a lot closer than say some of these other opponents that we mentioned earlier. Your Gigas and your Calvin Kattar's and your Chang Sun Juns, aka the Korean Zombie. So I just think that would be really interesting to see. Ilia Topuria, he's coming up, man. And you guys have better be ready to witness this guy ascend to the top. But yeah, let's get back to the judges, though. I can't pass it up. I still got more to say, We've seen some terrible judging this year, or, at a minimal, some questionable cards. The Leech versus D-Rod, Sean O'Malley versus Piotr Jan, Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon, Ankalaev versus Blachowicz, just these are some recent ones, but this is not a new thing. Judges' decisions have been a problem that have plagued every promotion for regional and professional since the inception of MMA. And, new judges have came and went, but the problem has remained the same. The subjective nature of fighting scoring itself. They can outline a criteria, but it still is so subjective in the latitude of interpretation. Most recently we saw just some strange scorecards. Another one that happened over the weekend, we didn't talk about the fight, but another one that happened from the weekend was Doug Crosby scoring the fight between Rafion Stotts, Danny Sabatello, 50-45 for Sabatello, while the other two judges scored the fight 48-47 for Stotts, in a fight that Stotts had clearly won, or at least, it was a lot closer, but somehow Doug Crosby scored the fight 50-45 for Sabatello. This judging, in my opinion, it's judging, / scoring issue. It's got a duality of problems at hand. Between the subjective nature of scoring, as well as the means by which the scoring is described, being the 10-point must system. The 10-point must system has showed, flawed results in boxing itself, being disparaging scorecards on fights in boxing where it's a one-dimensional fight, only punches to the body and head. Whereas here in MMA, there's so many things to score on: submission attempts, strikes both with the hands, with the feet, control of the clinch, control of the grappling. There's just a lot more variables at play to actually score. And with both of these issues, I don't think that there's a real clear fix to the problem. But I think the first step that needs to happen, judges need to be held more accountable. Facing fines, suspensions, sanctions, or, just at a bare minimum, answering questions as to how and why they scored X fight a certain way. Taxpayer dollars are being spent to pay these judges coming from, their respective state athletic commissions. So, I think as a service to the public paying these guys, we are owed explanations for how they scored these fights. And I don't think a written explanation will suffice. I want verbal communication, because I think if they just had a written response, maybe a written article, I don't think that all the questions would be addressed, or that questions that wouldn't be thought of would be answered in such written response. I think we need that. The media needs to be able to press these guys and get down to the nitty gritty. And if they're never going to allow media members to question these judges and at least derive answers as to how they scored some of these fights, maybe another option, we could have, we start placing cameras on these guys, like one of those little head cameras. I think that's maybe a little extreme, or at least placing a camera in every judge's corner, so then we can get a bird's eye view to see exactly what they saw. But even then, that's still going to be subjective, because the human eyes are different than camera eyes. It's just, maybe. Another suggestion, the verdict scoring system. Like we've been talking about, the averaging of thousands of real-time scores on the same fight to get a score down to a decimal place. And it seems to be doing well, in my estimation. This averaging of scores when you put thousands of people scoring the same fight. Now, I will state that this could be flawed. Just as full transparency. Just because it's a user-submitted score, so there is, an open possibility that a score for a certain fight could be spammed for one fighter just because he's a fan favorite. Now, I haven't seen this flaw play out per se yet. But it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. But also to keep in mind is this does not, however, mean the scoring criteria overall for fighting is or isn't flawed. Maybe transitioning to a decimal scoring system for the judges themselves is a thing where they score the fights, half point, where it's, 10-10, 10-9.5, 10-9, 10-8, 10-8, or 10-8.5, 10-8, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is not unprecedented either. It's been tested before. It was tested by the Edmonton Combative Sports Commission back in 2011, where they used this scoring system. And this scoring system would allow for nuanced rounds that are definitive rounds, where you get, your 10-8. Then you could have your close rounds where it's, 10-9.5. And then, you could have your close contested rounds, 10-9.5, 10-9. You could just allow for more nuance in scoring of rounds. But I think at the end of the day, we the fans just want clarity and transparency and how and why these judges came to the conclusions. I mean, I really want to know how Doug Crosby and Ron McCarthy scored the first round of the Paddy Pimblett fight for Paddy Pimblett. I just don't see how it's possible. I want to know. I just want them to be able to at least have to be able to answer for what was going on. I just want them to be able to at least be questioned. Like, what did you see? What did you see in this fight to be able to score for these things? But I'm not going to sit here and claim, that there are larger forces at play, like fighters or promoters paying off these judges. I'm not going to claim that. There's no concrete evidence for this claim, so I'm not going to sit here and throw that out there. But if evidence of this ever came out and, it was proved it was going on, I think it would all but spell the end of that promotion where this occurred, as well as leave a scar on the sport that I think would remain well beyond we can even fathom in a timeline sense. Ariel Helwani earlier this week, he put out a belief, and let me be clear, it was just his belief. He stated clearly that he did not have evidence that, judges could be scoring these fights in favor of, who the judge believes the promotion wants to win in order to get in better graces with the promotion. But this just leaves for me the question that remains, is that what is the net gain then for the judges? I mean, it is true that these judges, they make more money for higher profile fights, judging a prelim fight or even a regional fight. They make less money than if they were to judge a pay-per-view fight or a main event. That is true. They make more money for those. But the promotions don't decide which judge judges X fight, whether it be the main card on a pay-per-view or the prelims on a fight night card. The promotion doesn't decide that. Now they make suggestions, but at the end of the day, that comes down to the athletic commission. So, I just don't see how the judges stand to gain anything really by scoring a fight in favor of the promotion's, star fighter. But it does leave in a question, can anybody think of a time when, you're Conor McGregor, you're Paddy Pimblett, you're Khamzat Chimaev, these stars of the promotions. I mean, I'm just focusing on UFC just because that's the promotion I know the best. But, can anybody think of a time when, these stars clearly won a fight, but the judges somehow gave the fight to the lesser known fighter, your Jared Gordon or whoever it could be. Has that ever happened? And right now I'm struggling to think of cases. I can think of cases where, the more popular fighter clearly lost the fight and, the decision still went to, obviously the fighter that won. But, I cannot think of any cases where, this popular fighter, this star of a promotion, won a fight and then lost it on the judges' scorecard. I just can't think of that happening. And maybe that's a good thing, but, it just seems that, like I stated earlier, a lot of the times these stars, they will lose a fight, visually, but then somehow on the judges' scorecards, they turn up a winner. And that's strange. And I think as fans, we just want transparency. We want to know if that bad judging is going to happen, that it happens equally across the playing field. And like I said, I'm not going to claim, large or nefarious action, but, could this be an issue to where these judges, are trying to do what they think the promotion wants? Yeah, it's a possibility. It is a possibility. I don't feel confident in making that 100%, thinking that that's 100% what's going on. But, I'm not going to rule it out as a possibility. Let's put it that way. But as of today, MMAfighting.com posted an article stating the Mohegan Athletic Department Director of Athletics, Mike Mazzulli, is opening an investigation into that Rafion Stotts versus Danny Sabatello fight, which took place on Bellator, which we mentioned earlier in this little rant. Looking into that Doug Crosby 50-45 scorecard, while it isn't clear what is going to happen in the investigation or how it will be conducted, Mazzulli stated that he will be reviewing the fight with the three judges in question, most specifically Doug Crosby, to understand how that 50-45 was reached and what the other judges thought about the fight. He also stated the outcome of this review process / investigation could be loss of judging assignments, which I think is fair. These judges need to be open to punishment, open to sanction for clearly dissenting or questionable or just bad scoring. You have to face some punishment. You have to be held accountable when these kinds of things happen. And just as a final as a final note, I guess I just want to close this little rant on this. You have to understand that okay, if it were to come to light that corruption is happening and a promotion is paying off judges, you have to be willing to accept that then also, if one promotion is paying judges, that it is more than likely that all promotions are paying judges to keep their stars in line. And you have to be willing to accept that if more evidence comes to light. But honestly, we just want transparency. We want to know how and why some of these cards are being scored in the certain ways they are. Doug Crosby, what happened, man? What happened? Ron McCarthy, what happened, man? You scored that opening round 10-9. Paddy Pimblett? Really? Really? Doug Crosby, you scored that fight 50-45 for Danny Sabatello. Really? It just seems off, man. It just seems off. Again, I just want transparency. But leave in the comments what you think solution is, or what your theories could be on judges' solution, or just your general thoughts on MMA judging as a whole. But that's going to do it today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I will see y'all next week.